Christians are notoriously bad at investing. And so in this video, I'm going to take you through my 3 investing principles that will set you up to build generational wealth and be a blessing to your children's children. It's interesting, right? When it comes to investing, I want to cover off on a few different things. I think one of the reasons why Christians typically don't do well when it comes to investing is it comes down to their eschatology, kind of like their end time view of what's going to happen here. You know, it's almost like they've kind of drunk the Kool-Aid that Jesus is coming back tonight. And so because of that, there's no point in investing. Well, here's what I would say to that. I would say that we're probably living in the last moments of the end days when you look around the world. The Bible tells us that we'll never know, but there will be signs. And so you can look around and see some pretty evident signs here. But I would say to you, in the absence of knowing exactly when the second coming of Christ is, we've got to be prepared. Prepared doesn't mean that we just live for the moment or live in the day or live for now. Prepared means that we've got to be thinking about today, but we've also got to be thinking about down the line. And even if you just look at this mathematically, statistically, he's not coming back this year. How do I know that? Because statistically, he hasn't come back in the last 2000, right? So he may, but for me, I always want to be playing the long game as well as the short game, because if he does tarry and he takes another 200, 300, 400 years, then I want to have built an asset base that can fund the kingdom far beyond my lifetime. Here's another thing when it comes to investing. I'm only going to be talking about 2 investment classes, right? And there is only 2 investment classes in my opinion, right? There is business and there is real estate. And business will come in like owning all of one business or owning shares in another business. For example, a listed company on the NASDAQ or the ASX or the S&P or the FTSE or whatever. The reason why I'm only looking at those is because I'm only interested in investing in investments that have a yield. I guess money that is thrown off whilst you hold the investment. So for example, if I buy a piece of real estate, it doesn't matter what happens to the price of that piece of real estate. It could go up, down, or sideways. I'm getting rent every single week. If I think about buying stocks or owning businesses, then it doesn't matter what happens to the value of the stock. Over the time that you hold it, it'll go up, down, or sideways, but there is a yield that is paid out every quarter, every 6 months, or yearly, depending on the asset, right? So I'm only interested in investing in things that have yield. So the things that don't have yield, I'm not interested in investing in, because now you're just taking a punt, hoping that they are increasing in value at the time you want to sell them. So things like Bitcoin, things like art, wine, those kind of investments that don't have any yield, I'm not calling them investments. I don't have any of them. I will never have any of them because for me, the criteria for an investment is it must have a yield, right? That covers off on a little bit more my thesis. By the way, if you're sitting there and you're one of these Bitcoin fans, which I'm not, you do you. I'll be praying with you that the day you want to exit, it hasn't all gone to custard. All right, here's my first investing principle for you that I would love you to get your head around. Here it is. Don't time the market. Don't time the market. Right, this is a mistake a lot of people make, is they're trying to buy low and sell high. They're trying to do like a get in and a get out and make a buck. I personally feel like I'm likely to be talking to you as an entrepreneur. You've got a business, right? And typically the way that you build wealth is your business provides the cash flow and the profits from that go into assets, right? It's very, very simple to build wealth in the world that we live in today. Run a business, make a profit, take the profit, put it into assets that have a yield. Like you can't get it wrong if you do that, right? So here's the way I look at that. I want the things that I invest in to be long haul, to be slow and steady. I want to take a long-term view. The people that try and time a market have to be entrepreneurial in their investing. And for me, I want to be entrepreneurial in my businesses and not entrepreneurial in my investing. Why? Because I want to be focused in my entrepreneurial skill set. And I would rather put 100% of my entrepreneurial skills to my business and have investing that's easy, set and forget, than try and be entrepreneurial in my business and split that focus while being entrepreneurial in my investing and trying to time, a market and get in and out, right? So I would say to you, do not time a market. If we were to look at the stock market, I'll give you some stats, right? Because timing the market can work, usually doesn't work. And it can work if you're prepared to be attached to the market 24 hours a day to make quick decisions, right? So professionals, they can do okay. But if you can't do that, and you shouldn't do that, then the market is going to eat you alive. If we just look at the S&P 500, right? That's an American public company stock market. The long-term average return over 20 years, or a 20-year study, shows that the return is 8.2% on your money, 8.2%. So obviously, some are lower and some are higher, but the long-term average over 20 years is 8.2%. Now you might be thinking that's great, and that's a pretty cool return. Like if you could put enough capital into that machine and you could wait long enough, then that works out to be a pretty solid return. You can get better and you can get a whole lot worse, so it's a pretty solid return. But here's what's interesting. Over that 20-year period, there were 20 days of that 20 years that produced the bulk of the gains. Think about that. There's 20 days in amongst the span of 20 years that produced the bulk of that 8.2%. If you missed the 20 biggest days, your return over that 20-year period was just under 2% a year. So if you missed the 20 days in amongst the 20 years, you went from an 8.2% to a 1.9% yield. 1.9%, by the way, is not a return because it's eaten alive by inflation. So you went backwards. So just think about what's your likelihood of timing a market and getting the right 20 days out of a 20-year period. It's nearly impossible. And if you go a little bit further and you go to the top 30 days, so the 30 days that made money out of the 20-year period, and you missed the 30 days, you actually went backwards by about 1% on your capital. You had a negative return over that 20-year period, right? So, you've got a 20 to 30 days over 20 years that make all of your money. That's the problem with time in the market, right? And by the way, the market loves it when unassuming people go and, start punting on the stock market, because it will chew you up and spit you out and give you a hard luck story. And then you come back and say the stock market doesn't work. No, timing the market doesn't work. The stock market will give you 8.2% return if you take a long enough view, right? So lesson number one, do not time the market. I think about this scripture in Timothy. If I go to 1 Timothy 4:15, this is Paul obviously writing to Timothy. And this is, he's talking about the gift that Timothy has, which in his case is like preaching and building a church. For you, it's probably not preaching and building a church. It's, producing wealth, building businesses, advancing the kingdom, bringing salt and light to the marketplace. That would be the gifts that you and I have. But it's the same concept. This is what he says to Timothy. Do not neglect your gift, which was given you through prophecy when the body of elders lay their hands on you. So do not neglect your gift. It goes on to say, be diligent in these matters. Give yourself wholly to them so that everyone can see your progress. Give yourself wholly to them. See, the scripture talks about when you know exactly what you're gifted to go and do, just go and do it, right? Building businesses, building wealth. Give yourself wholly to them. The problem with having all of the side hustles and these other things is you're not now giving yourself wholly to the thing that actually builds the wealth. You're fractured in what you're doing, right? So for me, when it comes to business, just to reiterate that point, I'm like all in on building the businesses. I'm not all in on my investing. I am literally just taking money from my business profits and putting them into investing and forgetting about it, right? Not trying to time a market, just being in the game, right? And that means that there's a lot less pressure and a lot less headache, and life gets a whole lot easier doing it that way. All right, number two, the second investing principle that I would say to you is you have to learn before you earn. You have to learn before you earn. This is something that nobody wants to do anymore, right? Everyone wants to jump straight to the big end of town, the fun things, the big returns, but it doesn't work. You have to learn before you earn, okay? So what do I mean by that? I mean, you have to learn how the capital markets work. You have to learn how real estate works. You have to learn, even within real estate, there's a bunch of different ways that you can make money in real estate, right? My strategy is buy and hold because, again, I don't want to have the drama of of being entrepreneurial in my real estate holdings. I just want to buy something, forget about it for 25 years, and my kids will come along and bulldoze a property and build a nicer one. But I had to learn my strategy, right? So I had to learn the suburbs that I wanted to invest in. I had to learn how this suburb was better than this suburb. I had to learn how units and townhouses, like how much more of them I would have to hold compared to, house and land, and what that meant over a 30-year period. I had to learn my investing strategy. Now, you don't have to do that one. You might be in the business of flipping houses. Great, but you have to learn it, right? So how much do you spend on a kitchen before you overcapitalize, right? Things like that. But you have to actually take the time to learn. So for example, if you're going to do direct stocks and you're going to buy direct stocks on the stock market, you have to learn, right? You have to learn how to do that. And once you learn, then you just stick at it, stay at it, right? But you have to learn before you earn. So you have to learn how to read a prospectus. You have to learn how to read an earnings report. You have to learn how to read, every quarter a listed company puts out a how they're going type document, an earnings report. And you need to be able to learn to read, how is their share price reflected against cash at hand and assets under management? Are they undervalued at the moment, making it a good buy? Are they overvalued at the moment, making it a not so great buy? You've got to be able to learn that, right? And once you learn it, those skills will be with you forever. And one of the real reasons why this is important is because, if you learn something, you offset the risk of it. Right? Like risk and knowledge are like a seesaw, right? The higher the risk, the lower the knowledge. The higher the knowledge, the lower the risk. And so learning is the thing that's going to offset and give you, not the hard luck story that a lot of people have. It also, right, this concept of learn before you earn, we know from people that have won lottery, statistically, 80% of people that win lottery or get a large inheritance are in a worse financial position in 24 months. Why? Because they didn't learn. They didn't let their mental maturity catch up to the amount of money in their hand, okay? And so we want to get away from trying to race for quick wins, and we want to learn the process of investing and learn our strategy of investing, because there's 100 ways to invest and they're all going to work. But you want to learn a way and rinse and repeat it over a long period of time, rather than, flip a house and then do a buy and hold and then try and buy stocks and then do derivatives against stocks. Like the problem with that is you never do one long enough. You never do one. And so, to one degree, if you're chasing quick gains, the Bible tells you that that's not a smart way to go. But also, you need your mental maturity to catch up. If you get a quick load of wealth come in and you haven't got the maturity to handle what to do with it and where to put it and what you do with it next, which is what happens to lottery winners, then you'll end up scrambling. Your behavior will suck, everyone will steal from you, and before you know it, there'll be nothing left over. They would have picked your patch clean. So the game is about learning and about knowledge. This is one of my favorite scriptures of all time. If we go to Proverbs 13:11, this is what it says. Proverbs 13:11 says this: money earned quickly dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. Money earned hastily dwindles away because the mental maturity is not there to handle it. So all these people that that want to get rich quick, they end up throwing their life away, and it doesn't actually. It's interesting that money earned quickly dwindles away. In another translation says, "Get rich quick schemes lead to poverty, but money earned through integrity sticks around." And I guess that's what I mean when it comes to learn before you earn, because this day and age, everyone's trying to knock it out of the park and get a massive amount of money in a short amount of time. The problem is they haven't learned how to do it and they don't have the mental maturity to get there. You would be better off to earn little by little by little by little by little over a long period of time and let the Lord, refine your character to the point that when the money matters, you don't ruin it. The third principle that I want to get to you is don't eat your seed. So when it comes to investing, right, you've got you've got your initial capital and then you've got your yield. Well, I'm talking here about not eating your yield. It is a huge mistake that most investors make because they can't think long term. So they do a little bit of investing, they get a bit of a return, and because it's been hard and it's been a lot longer and they can't see momentum quickly, then they end up eating that little bit of return that they got. If we use the example of somebody investing $10,000 at 7%, right? or $20,000 at 7%. If you put $20,000 in the market at 7%, right, you're only going to get $1,400 in a year. So most people can't handle that. They look back and go, man, it's going to take too long. The next year is only going to be, the next year is going to be 7% of 2,100 or 21,400. It's like, so now they're only going to make $1,500 in the next year. And they're like, oh man, 2 years have passed and I've only made 3,100. So they can't get there in their head. So what they do is they trick themselves and they start taking the $1,400 in year one that they earn, or whatever, and then now they're out spending that money on dumb stuff, handbags, cruises, going on holidays, the new iPhone, all the stuff that does not move the needle when it comes to wealth, right? So you've got to get to the point where you do not eat your seed. You've got to leave the seed in there, because if you've ever played with a compound interest calculator, which we're about to do, like it compounds exponentially in the end, but it doesn't if you're taking out the seed at the start. You need to have the little bit in year one and the little bit in year two and the little bit in year three to get it to year 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And then in year 20, because you didn't eat the seed in the early years, it's exponential what happens, right? I'll give you some numbers just because I think it'll be fun. If we took $20,000 and we took a 20-year investing horizon, 3 scenarios. For somebody that invests $20,000, right? They get their $1,400 a year. If they take the $1,400 and live on it, so they've invested $20,000 and they take the yield and they go and use it for whatever, then at the end of 20 years, they've got $20,000. The same amount of money they put in, they've got at the end. Except, of course, that inflation has destroyed that $20,000. So the buying power of the initial $20,000 is probably half, maybe not half, somewhere near half. So scenario number 1, put $20,000, eat the seed because you can't handle it because you've got such a short-term horizon, you end up with $20,000. Strategy number 2, invest $20,000 and let the seed or the yield compound. So year 1, you get your 7%, and next year you get 7% on a bit more. Next year you get 7% on a bit more, and then you get 7% on a bit more, and it compounds, compounds, compounds. $20,000, 7% return with the yield left in and compounded. At the end of 20 years, your $20,000 becomes $80,774. 4 times. You get a 4 times return on your money. All right, 20,000 goes to just a little bit over 80,000. Now here's the real kicker. What if you and I decided to be investors and we went like above and beyond? We took our initial capital, we didn't eat the yield and we let it compound, and we contributed a little bit of money consistently through that 20 years, right? Imagine that as an outcome for you. So here's the scenario. You put $20,000 in originally, same as the other scenarios. You invest at 7% and you let the yield stay in so it's compounded. And on top of that, you take $2,000 every month and you put that money into the original capital. So once a month. So we got 20 grand up front, 7% yield put back in, and $2,000 a month added to the asset pool. What happens to that over a 20-year period? Well, the number comes out at $1,128,705. So think about the difference from a daily discipline point of view. Put 20,000 in and take the money, you end up with 20,000 in 20 years. Put 20,000 in and then add $2,000 a month and you end up with over $1.1 million. We're talking about a monthly change that's not a whole lot. And yet we're talking about an exponentially different outcome at the end of 20 years. Now, as business people, you and I, and you might be sitting there and you're like, I don't have 20,000. Okay, but you'll get it. You'll build a business, you'll run, you'll do sales, you'll do marketing, right? You'll figure a way of putting that be out of capital. And some of you are like 20. I could start this with 200,000. Great, well, you'll end up with 10 million, right? So just think about startup capital, think about the discipline of not eating the yield, and think about the discipline of taking profits every single month from your business and putting them into your asset, whatever asset pool you decide, and then just rinse and repeating every single month for 20 years. I tell you what it is, it's an absolute game changer in your life. It's an absolute game changer. And you'll be able to stand at the end of that period of time knowing that you left an inheritance to your children's children, right? And that you've got an asset base that beyond your life possibly can fund the advancing of the gospel, fund the church, fund strategic projects, and move the needle in advancing the kingdom. But it all comes down to today, and it all comes down to whether you've got the tenacity to be able to stick to it. So here's what I would say to you. Pick a strategy and do it for a very long period of time. Don't chop in, don't chop out, don't keep changing all the time, don't listen to everybody's advice. The other thing is don't listen to the news. The news is going to tell you every 5 minutes that you should not be doing any of these things because it's going to go too fast, or it's going to go too slow, or you got FOMO, you're going to miss out. Don't listen to any of those things. All I did from 2008 to today was make a decision that I would take money from my business and put it into assets and never think twice. And if I'd listened to the media, I wouldn't have bought any of the assets that I've bought. But because I didn't, I put money in, and I look back today and it's a large asset base that produces yield every day, every week, every month. And it's an asset base that can give to the kingdom way beyond my life. But it starts today, and it starts with discipline. If you like this, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, send this to somebody, give me a thumbs up, and give me a comment on the bit that stood out best to you. All right, hope that was valuable. Love ya. See you next time.